I start. Thanks very much for the comments and the presentations. My name is Ishmael Sunga. I work for the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions. So I'm much more on the producer side, and obviously my interests are going to be reflected in the comments I'm going to be making. I just wondered more broadly as a start, whether the narrative we have, at least from the producer side, that risk and reward is unevenly distributed across the entire chain, that typically the producer gets the highest risk and the lowest return. And as you go up the value chain, actually the profile changes. Those that get a lower risk gets a higher return. That's the question being whether the results of what you're getting more globally is reflecting that, or it's just what we think as farmers. But we think there must be something that could actually data that could present that kind of profile. And when we talk of governance in general, we're essentially talking about the governance of the value chain. We're talking about the power imbalances as they relate to the different actors. And obviously the power lies up and less on the primary producers. And whether your inquiry, as it was looking at the impact, also factored in that which we think, perhaps wrongly so, as producers, is a key issue. That really, when you talk about it, it's about power imbalances, and no matter which value chain, it could be cocoa, it could be cassava, it could be potatoes, it could be commercial crop, or it could be a non-commercial crop. We tend to think that that DNA is actually coded the same. And in fact, one would mischievously say that perhaps research should be looking at how to help farmers actually deal with that, apart from it helping policymakers. But perhaps the next cycle of the research would actually be looking at how do you advise farmers to deal with that kind of issues. It's essentially issues of fairness and equity in the distribution of risk and reward. It's also fundamentally, as I heard also from some of the case studies, an issue of issues and fairness in accessing factor production. So I think that's probably the same. The final point perhaps is the case from Zimbabwe and Swaziland on the beef. I mean, the question that was fundamentally raised was, when we say value addition or value chain, perhaps the question is value in whose eyes? It looks like the cultural value actually was seen to maybe to have a better weighting, particularly on the non-commercial production side, dominated much more by the commercial, by the social sort of value, and whether there could be a proxy for including that cultural or social value as part of the measurement. It could be a bit complicated, but I just wondered whether that could be some of the issues. The final point really is this one, that non-commercial chains, maybe they are still value chains, whether they should have a different methodology than the ones that are commercial or otherwise. I'm not sure, but I just wondered aloud. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, statements, information? Here.
Thank you. My name is Michael Hauser. I'm a former colleague of Patrick Okori at ICRISAT in Nairobi. Two speakers mentioned the misalignment between scientific evidence and political interest. And I wonder whether, you know, what to do about that and what role political economy analysis could play to at least understand what we could potentially do about that misalignment. Thank you.
My name is Stephen. My comment is not about what the panelists had just said. I'm just asking a general question. Why the focus of value chain on commercial crops? Why not indigenous crops that are very valuable to poor people's livelihood? Can we have a shift of thinking of developing some of these value chains for crops that are not known at the international market? Thank you.
If I could just make one comment in response to Maria's point on capacity building, I think it's worth mentioning that one of the VCA4D studies, the study of milk in Burundi, was able to benefit from co-funding by another EU program, a framework agreement for bilateral aid to Burundi from the EU, also implemented by Agrinatura, which was ATAB. So ATAB was able to increase the funding so that there could be a national counterpart or a national expert for each of the three the three elements of the analysis: social, economic, and environmental, which really greatly increased the capacity of analysis within the team. I think it was an extremely positive experience, and it will be interesting to see if it could be replicated in other studies. Thank you.
Any other comments or interventions? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Gideon Onoma, and I work for NRI, which has been very active in these studies. And I like the part of the presentation by the FAO expert, where value chain analysis doesn't end with a snapshot of what is happening in the value chain, but also explores opportunities for upgrades within the value chain. Now, with VCA4D, the key expectation is that you have a snapshot. And I wonder whether from your experience, you can give further arguments in support of going a bit beyond that to look at opportunities where some improvements can be made to the benefit of the key actors in the value chains that are studied. Thank you.
There's a comment here.
Just share with you some comments coming from the audience behind the screen. In particular, some colleagues who have been involved in VCA4D studies also mentioned the fact that now the methodology is applied outside the framework, the institute framework of VCA4D. They use the method in different contexts, so it shows that it can be also a way for broadening the scope in terms of product also, because the issue of the type of value chain that is addressed is also important, and it can be applied to a different set of crop. And also some other colleagues also mentioned the point raised by John about the fact that we're also trying to more and more put capacity building component into the way we are doing the analysis, and that's kind of an important issue for the agenda of the project.
Okay, so I suggest now we move towards the end. I mean, actually, these comments, questions, discussions are very, very interesting. We could have spent the whole afternoon on that and really having a conversation and moving forward together on all those elements. So we all are going to go to lunch after that, rather frustrated because we didn't tackle all that, but not frustrated at all, and enjoyed it because we've put some of the elements that will have to be discussed and worked on by VCA4D, by ENTPA, or by FAO, by Rule Forum, by just by everybody, because this is a public service of delivering information for policymakers, and this is what we're about in many ways. So that's something that we will go on. We talked about imbalance of powers, of advising farmers, of social values, of commercial crops, of, okay, many things. So thanks a lot for all your reactions. And I pass on to our 4 panelists in a strange exercise that will be, they pick up whatever comments they want to do on what was raised here, and at the same time make their concluding remarks. Not an easy task, especially time constrained one, but I'm sure we'll get some other elements or perspectives on our discussion, which obviously won't finish at the end of session 1. So is Pietro around?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to follow the same order than for the initial presentation. So Pietro, that's yours.
Okay, thank you, Pierre. So I will pick probably the power imbalance. So the remarks that has been raised, and related also why there is not always a matching in between political interest and evidences. So I don't think that the question is why, because that's related to the power of balance, and is how we are going to tackle it, and how we get into this dialogue, and how we make this power to move from one side to the other to create a more balance. That's to me the real challenge. And for example, also to connect to what the colleague of Southern African Union was highlighting, the uneven distribution among the different chain in the different actors in the chain. Sorry. For example, the banana value chain in Burundi. What we did, we pushed for we help. This was a demand from the producer mainly to create a union to be able to raise their voice, to be able to organize themselves, and to be able to put their needs on the table with government. So this, I think, is one of the key issues is to try to balance this power. Then one remark I think is important to me is the power of the value chain analysis is this. First of all, is spreading this message and the need of taking decision based on solid and robust evidences. And this is not there. I don't know what is your experience. Mine is that is not there. It's not out there. This is not a reality. And many decisions are taken without those information. And I think that pushing on this direction is really key. And related to that, as the colleague of FAO was highlighting, and also John underlined, is the capacity building. So to be able to make these tools to be available not just from these international communities, let's say, side, but to be able to be anchored into the national institution, national universities, and to be able to carry this analysis in a good and solid way without all the assistance that is required now. This is what I want to share with you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pietro. Lisa?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, maybe on as well the power imbalance, as I mentioned, the Le Basique study on the value chain imbalance in cocoa. Exactly, we have to work at our side on the consumption side to see where the imbalance is, how we can raise the price of cocoa, and we can enforce the conversation with the partner countries and partner governments and support transparency, how the higher price is really then reaching the farmer. Because it's not only in the EU the problem, but the problem is along the whole value chain. I think we very closely work together with INPA. I just saw, so we're in the room, I think. So yeah, I think that we are really concentrating on that. We do support farmers organizations via the German Development Corporation. And we did have as well exact advocacy workshops on trade policy to raise the voice for the farmers. And we further want to work on that in a network, in farmers network, with those ideas. Then to the question if crop or not crop, no cash crop or food crops, we do look at integrated approaches. For example, in Green Innovation Center in Côte d'Ivoire, we work on cocoa on the one hand, but as well on diversification with cassava, and and we work with millet instead of wheat, and all these improvements of food security and nutrition. Absolutely, as well our focus and value chains. The other thing on how to raise the farmers' income, we do work on this idea of smart income mix for farmers, paying for environmental services. And we did start a G7 initiative on compensate farmers, smallholder farmers, for their contribution to save the public goods, biodiversity, climate change. And there it's very important to have further methodologies to calculate price tags. For example, for biodiversity, we really need more research on that, and we are always eager to learn from everyone who is working on that as well, how we can continue this debate and calculating price tags, and what can we pass on, what should we urge for to pass on to smallholders as in this sense of paying for environmental services. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. Maria?
Yes, I would like to respond the question about the commercial versus indigenous. Normally what we do is to ask the government, what are your priorities, value chains that you would like to support? Because one of our preconditions is that the private and the public sector, they are willing to really embark in the process. So we do, normally we get a list of value chains, and we do the rapid appraisal. And then what we do is to evaluate them, and we have a methodology to see which one will have major impacts from the economic, social, and environmental point of view. Sometimes what we face is the political will, for example, from the Ministry of Agriculture in Zambia to support maize, when 80% of the budget go to maize, and not to support another crops that would be much important for the social and for the food security in Zambia in particular, you know, that there is a huge rate of undernutrition. So, but to your question, yes, we really consider indigenous, but at the end of the day, is that value chain who will contribute more from the economic point of view, and the social and environmental is the one that we support. And then I want to support about the upgrading strategy, the enhanced business models. And I have to say, because I am leading some of those value chain analysis and upgrading strategies, for me, the second part is more, I mean, is because you are proposing actions, concrete actions, and you have to prepare business model. You have to show that bringing those technologies, bringing those enhanced practices, there is a profitability, and also that those enhanced business models, they are social and environmental sustainable. Then you calculate the outreach, and then you come with an investment plan that the most important that is validated by the stakeholders. And I like that in our process as well a lot, because it's not that we say, okay, you have to invest in this kind of action, but we go there with our proposed business model, and we validate with all the actors. And this is also important because, and I insist, the private sector have to be there, because many of the business model that we propose also the modality of implementation. And the modality of implementation, we have to bring the private sector and the financing sector. We cannot continue with interest rates of, for example, 26%, 30% for a smallholder that cannot apply for. We have to de-risk. So this is important. I mean, of course, the upgrading strategy have to be based in a robust analysis, but from my professional point of view, I would decrease maybe the time needed for this robust analysis and the number of indicators, go more towards the action and the enhanced investments. Yeah, and also the mobilization of resources. And this is also what we do during 1 year process, because we put together all the actors. There is not any workshop that you don't have representation from the academy, ministries, private sector, NGOs, civil society. I mean, it's like important, and I like the process a lot of what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. I'll just make maybe two comments. The first one is that in general, profitability and de-risking carry costs. And the downside is often when you are de-risking, and if you are down in the food chain, you're going to carry a lot of weight and less benefit. And that's what the colleague was from Southern Africa was talking about. So I believe that one of the aims of VCDA is to help improve the policy-making environment and its implementation. So it brings me to another general comment, which is really my conclusion, that in principle, the idea should be to strengthen mutual accountability across different stakeholders. And that can be development partners or DPs, as others call them, government, the farming households, and the community. There has to be that mutual accountability across the board. I think the challenge is to get the metrics that will help you to be able to measure and be able to give the evidence necessary to make the right decisions. The second thing is you'll need to build a capacity, let me not say capacity, the capability, which means the knowledge and the infrastructure you need for many times we get a hang up on training people. If you don't have the infrastructure, both the soft and the hardware, it's dead on arrival. And so we need to think more broadly, in my opinion, move away from just capacity building to capability building, which builds another factor of sustainability.
So now the technology I need to teach. So the moment you say sustainability, you are into capability, and that is more complex. So I like the approach that we are talking about, and I think this is where my final comment is, again, what I said earlier on. The beauty of meta-analysis, it allows you to identify areas that can inform your capability strategy design. And without a capability strategy design, most of the questions we've raised here, misalignment, benefit sharing, how do you deal with scale and scope, all these things will continue remaining. And then lastly is to remind every one of us that there was an Agri-Food Systems Summit in 2021. And actually, the food systems of the world are globalized. Once you're eating the beef here, it might have been actually produced by some smallholder farmers somewhere. And that's linked to so many other things. And that is why I think comparing across similar value chains and looking more at this agri-food system approach, that allows you to see the transitions from a food crop. For some people, maize is a food crop. For others, it's a cash crop. So the definition of food or cash crop is actually very nuanced and very, very biased. What you call a food, I might call it a cash. For example, I don't eat maize. For me, it's a cash crop. I eat finger millet. That's why I'm told. So there are all these challenges, and we need to think more specifically from a context. If we strengthen the social side of what we do, I think that has been the weakest link in most of the science. I also come from plant breeding, and we are very weak on that. We only think tons per hectare. but we don't ask many other things that actually influence the success of society. Thank you very much.